Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy during this time. So we're going to move on with the question of delineating an argument. You're going to be writing an essay on this topic, and we're going to walk through a sample of this essay because it's a little bit unusual. The structure and format is largely the same. There shouldn't be any surprises there, but the way that we are thinking about it is new, and it's not quite something that we've done before. So there is a sample essay that you'll see attached to the assignment, and you're going to see that recreated here step by step. If you have not already viewed the first presentation and you haven't already completed that first assignment where you're going through paragraph by paragraph, you need to do that before you do this. This is, of course, assuming this assignment is assuming that you have already completed that. So if you haven't, don't get yourself twisted up. Go do that first and then come back and do this. As a reminder, I want you to take notes. This isn't for me, this is for you. Taking those notes helps lock these into your brain. You might feel a little bit silly sitting at a kitchen table or something, watching a YouTube video and taking notes on it, but I promise you that that is the way that you go around, want to go about doing this. Again, please view the presentation in its entirety before you start writing the assignment. So having gone through the process of delineating an argument, that assignment we did before, that paragraph by paragraph, taking each paragraph and summarizing it down, our goal now is that we're going to turn those notes, which is effectively what they are, into a single coherent piece of writing that lays out in a clear way what we think this author is trying to say. Remember, we are not analyzing yet. We'll get there. We are going to analyze, but right now we're just delineating. So the difference between delineation and analysis, you'll be able to see it in the thesis I'm about to show you. Of course, our thesis is the central point of our essay, right? That's the focus, that's the sun that everything rotates around. So we need to make sure that our thesis is just what we want it to be before we move on to trying to support it. So for a delineation essay, which is what we're looking for, we would just say the author's argument is X, whatever we're saying the author's argument is, and note, this is how they make it. For an analysis thesis, which we're not doing, for an analysis thesis, we would say the author's argument is, again, X, and they make it well, or they make it poorly, or it's logical, or it's not logical, or whatever. And we're not doing that. All we're looking for in this essay is to say, what is this author's argument and how do they make it? We're not making a qualitative judgment. The structure of the essay is unchanged. That's not really different. We're still going to have a body, an introduction paragraph and a body paragraph. It's still going to be that TIER-IERS structure that we've been working with, but we're not making those qualitative judgments like we did even when we were doing the ones before, right? What did you think about Amir? What did you think about Romeo and Juliet? Did Amir change? Didn't he? Romeo and Juliet, was it fate or was it free will? All of that stuff. That's you kind of forming an opinion about this. Now, obviously, you are forming an opinion. You're saying this is what I think the author is saying, but you're not going into an analysis yet. So, your thesis. Your thesis is just a statement about what your final thoughts are regarding the author's thesis and how you think they made their argument. Remember, we sort of came up with that preliminary thesis, and then we said, yeah, that might change as we go through the essay. We might find a new detail that we didn't notice before, and that's okay. Just for the sake of continuity, I'm going to continue with the sample thesis that I gave you guys before. But what we're looking for is how the author makes that argument. Well, if that's the case, what are we looking for? So we say, first, did the author state their thesis openly or not? If they stated their thesis openly, then we're in business. That's great, right? They just told us what their thesis is. If they didn't state it openly, we need to kind of infer. We need to think about what they're saying without really saying it. That's actually the case we find ourselves in right now. And then we ask, how did they make their argument? So did they use hard data? Like, did they use studies and facts and figures and statistics? Did they use personal experience? Did they interview an expert? Did they do some sort of combination of those things? That's what you're looking for how they make their argument. What did they do to get this point across to you? So for this particular essay, they don't make their thesis. Lane Wallace does not make her thesis explicitly. It's implied. She doesn't come right out and say it. And she uses mostly stories and some personal experience to get that point across. So that's my thesis. Wallace never openly states their thesis, using rhetorical questions and anecdotes to imply that survival isn't selfish. So here's my introduction paragraph. My opener, I'm actually going to skip the opener for this one. I was kind of playing around with it, and just kind of based on what we were doing and thinking about it, I said, this essay doesn't really need an opening statement. I can just kind of go into talking about Wallace herself. This is a good reminder that the guidelines I'm giving you for these essays, they're guidelines. They're not hard and fast rules that it's going to be the exact same way every single time. So in this instance, I didn't include an opener, and I think that's going to be fine. So I go right into my frame. In her essay, Is Survival Selfish?, Lane Wallace explores precisely the question that the title asks. So you know what is the title of the essay, you know who wrote it, and you know what the essay is about, and it's convenient because she just tells you right in the title. So for the focus, I almost thought about eliminating the focus sentence for this as well, but I decided to keep it in, and I'm just saying my focus sentence is basically saying there isn't a focus. It's a short piece. You can kind of look at the whole thing all together. So I just say the text is short, which allows for a comprehensive delineation. And then again, here's my thesis. Wallace never openly states her thesis, using rhetorical questions and anecdotes to imply that survival isn't selfish. So now I need to find some evidence to support that thesis. And I'm in a little bit of a bind because Wallace's thesis is implicit. She never comes right out and says it. And because she never comes right out and says her thesis, she's never exactly providing direct evidence for it because she never came right out and said it. So in order to delineate this, I'm having to do a little bit of guesswork and figure out what she's trying to get at underneath her original statements. So the first part is I'm not going to provide evidence, quote unquote, for the fact that Wallace doesn't make an explicit claim, because you can't provide evidence for something's non-existence, right? All I can say is I read the essay. She never makes an explicit claim. I'm going to mention it. I'm going to say that she doesn't, but there's no way to provide evidence for that because you can't provide evidence that something doesn't exist. All you can say is, well, I didn't see it. So in my thesis, I mentioned two things. I say that she uses rhetorical questions, and I say that she uses anecdotes to illustrate her point. So those are the things that I have to provide evidence for. So here's my first body paragraph. It's going to be in 2 slides. My topic sentence is just, it's unusual, but Wallace never makes an explicit claim in this text. She does strongly imply that it isn't always selfish to ensure one's own survival. So I've said this is what I think she's saying, but I do mention that she never mentions it. I mentioned that she mentions that it's never explicit. So introduction. In the 3rd paragraph, Wallace asks the rhetorical question, is survival really selfish and uncivilized, or is it smart? Note my use of ellipses right here. That's just because I am leading into my quote in the middle of a sentence, and I want the reader to know that, like, hey, there was some sentence before this. So I start with an ellipsis, and then that lets them know that. So my introduction, you know where I'm getting my evidence, and I say that it's a rhetorical question, and then I lay the rhetorical question out. The reasoning is where things get a little bit complicated, right? Because it's an implicit piece of evidence, I need to explain my thinking. Why do I think that this rhetorical question suggests the thing that I think it suggests? So I'm going to say, in the first 2 paragraphs, she uses the story of J. Bruce Ismay to illustrate that society looks down on people who save themselves. right? So I've set up like, oh, this is what she's already said before the quote that I just gave you, right? And then I say, just by asking the rhetorical question that contradicts that, that being the thing that she already said society thinks, she's kind of implying that it is smart, right? Because if she didn't disagree, if she agreed with the thing that society thinks, that you shouldn't save yourself, she would just say, what a great point. Society is totally right. You should look down on people who save themselves. But she doesn't do that. She asks this question trying to kind of guide you, the reader, to your own conclusion that like, oh no, I guess it isn't always selfish and uncivilized. Maybe it is smart. So that's what I'm saying. She's using these rhetorical questions to make this point. So here's my second body paragraph, and this is the part where I'm going to talk about your use of anecdote. Notice my introduction for this is fairly long because I'm pulling something out of paragraph 6, but in order to understand what's going on in paragraph 6, you need to reference something that happens in paragraphs 4 and 5. That's what the introduction sentence is for. The introduction sentence is for giving the reader any information that they need in order to make sense of the quote that I'm about to give them. So, in paragraphs 4 and 5, Wallace recreates a story about a pipe exploding near Grand Central Station and her observation that people were not moving away from what could have been a very dangerous situation. In paragraph 6, she notes that we may have an instinct for survival, but it clearly doesn't always kick in the way it should. Again, now, because she's not making an explicit point, I need to really explain why I think this quote helps. Although she doesn't make any direct statements, right? I'm admitting that she doesn't do that and that I'm kind of reading between the lines here. Although she doesn't make any direct statements, her implication seems to be that if people aren't going to act to survive on their own, then that's on them. And then I just have a summary sentence. The combination of rhetorical questions and commentary on anecdotes makes her implied claim fairly clear. All right, I'm not going to worry about going through a summary paragraph with you. It's pretty straightforward. You can see what I did in the example essay, and the construction of it is not anything new or unusual. It's just the same sorts of summary paragraphs that you've already been doing. So again, if you have any questions, do please make public comments so that any of your classmates that may have had the same question can see your question and then also my response, and we'll help each other learn that way. All right, have a great day.